Hi, everyone. If anybody's here yet, I know I'm early. So, as I fix this, okay. Hello, welcome. Trying to fix my gadget here because it's falling apart. But welcome, everyone. This is what happens, right? So, this is my first time doing a live, so we'll give it our best chat here. Let's see what happens. Welcome. I'm so glad you guys joined. It's going to be good. Going to be informative, and I'm also going to be sharing some tools. I see some people I know. Hello, Jorge. Hi, Jesse. And I think Anna Lawrence. Welcome, welcome. We're going to give some people time here to join us. So as they join in, please type in just sort of what is your role in your agency. So if you're a service provider, you can put, are you a case manager? Are you a social worker? Are you a promotora? What is your role? What kind of service do you provide? Or are you a mom, right? A caregiver? Just to kind of see. Hi, Eva. See who we have here. I see Rosalva. Hello. This is going to be interesting. Those that know me know that I am not tech savvy, so this is definitely a leap for me. But we have to get with the times, so here we are. Hello, hello. Families Uniting Families. There's two, so I don't know who's there. Who's that? And there's Eva. Hello, hello. Eva's a mom. Yes. Moms, we have had it rough this last 2 years, and we definitely had a lot of losses. We lost a lot of freedom and a lot of free time because, we had to feed everybody for when they were off from school, had to be the teacher, had to be everything. Healthcare management from Juanita, social worker and mom. Yeah, all right. Very good. Social workers, all service providers. I'm sure you have seen the news lately. There's a lot of rage out there. There's a lot of depression. Suicide has increased. Therapist and DCFS worker. Welcome, welcome. So I just asked, what kind of service do you provide? So if you're a case manager, a therapist, a social worker, a promotora, a mom, worker and uncle, are you a caregiver? For sure. Uncles played a big role in keeping the family together and sane. They served as a support system. So I'm really thankful for my sister, right? So we were able to kind of check in on our parents and give each other breaks when we needed to. So for sure, it's definitely an amazing role, but we also had our losses. We weren't able to convivir, to be able to be together, to gather. And it was definitely a very difficult time. We're still in the middle of it. And that's why it's unresolved grief because it's ongoing. Welcome, Yvette. See homeostasis girl. All right. So let's talk a little bit about grief. I know it is not a sexy topic. It is not something that we usually talk about, but that is the problem, right? We're not talking about it and we're not coping really at all or very well with it. And therefore, we see what's happening in society, right? We see all the shootings, we see the robberies, we see teenagers going crazy. Um, and for us, as moms, as caregivers, as social workers, the job didn't stop. The job continued even though we were having all these losses. So I thought it was important to bring just awareness to it so that we begin coping and get from the stuck place to an unstuck place and start actually setting up goals, living our life again and not being stuck in the middle of the grief because the pandemic unfortunately continues, right? We thought it was going to be 2 weeks of lockdown and then it's going to be over, but here we are 2 years later, still coping with it and dealing with it, and haven't had really a relief, And part of the challenge is that we get close. It's like we see the light at the end of the tunnel, and then Delta happens again. We get that vaccine. Yay, we're great. We're gonna be fine. And then Omicron. It's like, oh my goodness. So it's just an ongoing grief process, and we haven't even finished dealing with the previous one. We still have, dealing with the grief of 2020, 2 years ago, that has accumulated, and it keeps piling up. It keeps piling up because we don't have time. We don't have time to deal with it, or we just have to move on with life. And sometimes that's great if we're able to acknowledge it, but it becomes problematic when it starts filtering into our jobs, right? And we'll talk about some of the symptoms. We'll talk about what does it look like. Are we, experiencing some grief ourselves? And then I'll give you some tips on how to cope with it, and we'll do a little exercise along the way to help us deal with it. Okay. So welcome everyone that came. And let me see, what time is it? Oh, it's barely 7:01. You guys are all on time. We're early. Thank you. I checked in early to just kind of try out the video, making sure that it worked. Yay. And I haven't even asked you if you can hear me, so I'm assuming you can. All right. So I think we are going to get started. All right. So I asked what service you provide, and that's important because it depends on what you do, what kind of losses you're going to have. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. You can hear me. All right. So I want you to put in the chat, okay, and raise your hand if you have lost somebody, or if you know of someone that has lost someone in the last 2 years. So just kind of put the little hand. You're welcome. All right. So the question is, thank you, Yvette. Yes, it's important. We don't get to cope. We don't have time for ourselves. We're always busy. Yeah. So I see some hands going up. And yeah, I think the majority of us have experienced, even if it wasn't a personal loss, it was definitely our clients. Our clients were losing people. And sometimes it was their most important people, their support system, were the one that were dying. And that was really tough as a clinician, as a supervisor. Lots of hands going up. I think nobody's escaped this, whether again, if it was a personal loss or it was a loss through our friends or a loss of that our clients had, it really impacted them. But we took on all that grief, right? We took on all that pain and all the sense of loss and helplessness that the clients felt because they lost their support system. And what did we do with it? Hopefully, if you had a supervisor, you vented to your supervisor because that was the right thing to do, right? To be able to share the pain or just the heaviness. It was just this heaviness of having to hold space for everyone else, and, holding their hand, or even just feeling the helplessness, of them losing their loved one that was their support system, children losing their uncles and aunts, their grandmas, it was terrible. I'm talking about when the pandemic first started, but it still continues. It's been ongoing throughout. And our Latino community and our clients of color, are definitely the ones that were hit the hardest. And they were already struggling as it was. So there was a ton of losses when it comes to that. And then the weird part of it too is that we didn't have a chance to grieve and have our rituals, right? So there were so many restrictions with the funeral homes, or the gatherings, that we didn't get to have the connection and the healing part, rituals that are very healing. Okay. So, for example, when we have funerals And as being on the receiving end and on the giving end of the hug, usually there is a part when you have the service that you go and you hug the family, right? We didn't have that. That was a big loss, and like I said, being on the receiving end and on the giving end of the hug is so healing because usually people break down, even if they don't know you that well and you're there at the funeral, it feels kind of weird, hugging the person that you may not know that well. But if you know that person, oh my goodness, it gives the person permission, right, to grieve and to cry it out and to let it out. Because with grief, it's stuck, right? It's in our stomach, it's everywhere. And in order to get it out, it has to be a physical event. We have to cry it out, we have to hug it out, we have to scream it out. And that's why you see now the moms. They have the screaming moms in the football field. I don't know if you guys have seen that. Um, that they go and get their rage out. And yeah, because it's a guttural reaction, right? That we have to losing someone. But we missed out. We missed out in all the rituals that help us heal and help us move forward when it comes to grieving. And that's with, losing someone, the losses that we know. But the other losses that we had were plenty, and they still are. We're still, missing out in a lot of things. But one of the biggest one is just missing out on the previous life that we have, the pre-COVID life, whatever that was for everyone. Okay, whether it was, being able at the beginning is being able to hug your parents. Oh my goodness, that was so hard for my parents to understand. And for me as a mom, trying to keep my children safe, it was so stressful. But it was a gigantic loss for the kids and for the parents, for the grandparents. They missed out on 2 years of their development because they weren't together, right? And we were trying to keep everybody safe before the vaccine. So it was a whole year that sort of went by before we were able to get together. So there was another tremendous amount of loss that occurred, that it wasn't just a death, right? And unfortunately, when this happens, death is the one that we acknowledge grief to. But when it's not a death, when it's, the loss of going to school, the loss of now, having to do everything virtually, having to learn telehealth and not seeing clients in person, having to, the loss of going to the grocery store before, without worrying that you're going to die or bring something home to your family. Um, the loss of safety. We lost, our innocence when it comes um, to feeling safe in being outside without a mask and without risking, our life just being out there doing our regular thing that we did, whether it was, going to work or being with friends or visiting family. It was a lot of losses. So I want you to type in the chat, what are some of the losses that you had that came up for you, and you can maybe they're still there, right? We are not going to go back to what it was before, I think, ever. So the way that it's going to work, I think it's just going to be we have to adjust to a new normal. And I know we talked about that a lot at the beginning, of COVID in 2020, 2021, but it's going to look different. It's not going to look the same. And that is a loss in and of itself. And it's hard because, we like our comfort zone, and our comfort zone is no longer there. So, what are some of the losses you had? I want to see. I mentioned some of the ones, that we had as moms, right? Um, Going to the grocery store, loss of, time because you had to cook so much when the kids were at home and everybody was at home. What are some of the losses you had? I want to see what you lost. Social life, yes. Oh my God, that was so hard. Especially, I think, for single people. But even as a mom and as a married woman, oh my God, I miss my social life. It was my escape from mommy time to being with friends. And I miss my friends. It was hard. What else? Any other losses you guys can think of that you had? Gatherings. I miss potlucks at work. I don't know if anybody else misses that, but I miss that. It was fun. Hugs. Ooh, big time. Physical touch, right? It's a big one. The freedom of not wearing a mask. Yes. Gathering with friends and family. Hmm. Financial. Financial loss too. Yeah. It was a ton of losses, right? For kids, I think especially, I think for us as caregivers, our service providers, we lost some of our clients. We lost, that connection sometimes that we had with them. Having to do telehealth is helpful. I think we learned a lot from it, and I think it opened the doors for a lot of people as well as far as a resource because it was more accessible. But it was hard. It's not the same, right? And it was hard to engage at the beginning, because it was new to us too, engaging the kids. So not knowing how to plan for the future, yes, that was hard because how do you want to plan a vacation, but I'm still in that boat, right? I want to go to vacation, but how do you know? How do you know if the planes are going to be grounded, or they're going to let you out of the airport, or it's um it's definitely that. Um, Being at work, being in person at work. Yes, not having to share space. Space was a big one. Not being in community in the office. This has affected a lot of our staff, especially older staff. Yeah. I think for older staff, it was hard because they have to get with the times too, right? And get virtual and get electronic. And, some of us were before the times of cell phones. So it was hard having to connect and not being there because that, again, that's the outlet sometimes, right? When you're a parent going to work, that is your outlet of not having the role of mommy role or spouse role. This is your me time. And it was hard for them, for a lot of the staff to not be able to go to the office and have that space. What else? Anything else? All right. So I want you to think of your losses. So as we move on, when I talk about the symptoms or when I talk about, how we're going to cope, it is important not spending the holidays and special events together. Yes, self care. It is important for you to know what are the losses that you had because that's going to help you identify kind of what the plan is going to be, right? How are you going to make some changes to begin coping? Or if you already started coping, to continue your work on self care because we gave it up, right? We drank more. We ate more. We gave ourselves permission when we are stressed out and when we are grieving. We want to comfort ourselves. And we find comfort sometimes in the not so healthy things. And therefore, the 15 pounds extra of COVID or 20 or 30 or whatever it is for everybody. For those of us that didn't take exercise as our coping skill and instead, reach for the fridge, we gained some pounds. So it is something that I want you to keep in mind. What are the losses? Okay. All right. So let's talk about unresolved grief. What is unresolved grief? So unresolved grief is a long-term type of grief. Okay. Usually, when people grieve, like I said, the death of a loved one, you're grieving for a while and then you sort of kind of get back on track. With unresolved grief or complex grief, it's not just one loss, it's sometimes multiple losses. And it's extended. It goes for a longer period of time. So it may last for a few years. And this is where we are. We are at 2 years of losses, right? And we haven't had a chance again to sort of breathe or to sort of reflect because we have to continue to work and we have to continue to provide the service and provide comfort for the people in our lives because we're the caregiver usually, right? Whether it is for our clients or it is for our kids or our spouses, we are there for them and we sort of put things outside because we got things to do. So the grief lasts much longer when it's unresolved. Again, it lasts for a few years. Sometimes instead of getting better, it gets worse, right? And this is where I see that as a society, we're sort of failing to talk about this because that's why people are getting off the hook. Okay. This is why people are blowing up, on others, service providers, and getting in fights in parking lots, why the road rage, it's getting worse because we're not talking about it and we're not addressing it. So thank you for being here and learning. So please spread the word and help others become aware because that's part of coping, okay? If we become aware that it is impacting us, and then recognize in which way or which areas of our life is impacting us, then we can do something about it. Okay. So thank you for being here. All right. So unresolved grief is just grief that lasts longer. Okay. And it sometimes it impacts your personal life in a deeper way than regular grief. So we are all there as a society and the world. We are all grieving long term, and it's an ongoing loss. So, what are some of the symptoms? What are some of the things that we need to look out for? So, I want you to keep a tally for yourself and see if you have any of the symptoms that I'm going to read to you. Um, and just keep a tally and see how many apply to you. Okay. All right. So, some of the symptoms include intense sadness that doesn't improve with time. So, just kind of in a funk. And it's a long term funk, right? We've been in a funk for the last 2 years. Um, and then fond memories turn painful. So we start thinking about the good times and when we were able to get together and when we were able to, go on vacation, and we get resentful and we get mad. And it hurts, right? Because we want to do those things and we're not able to. All right. So that's number 2. Number 3 is avoiding getting close to people, relationships. Um, we have fears of relationships. We have fear of starting anything, right? Because where is it going to go? Where are things going to be? There's a lot of ambivalence. So we are fearful of making new connections. We don't really want to give it the time of day, right? Um, Numbness, emptiness, fatigue, and digestive issues. That's number 4. So if you're having stomach issues, right? If there is constipation or diarrhea, or if there is just this kind of like acidez, right? You have um, acid reflux. Um, it's a visceral, again, reaction, okay, that we have to grief. It's in our stomach. So we're going to have stomach issues. Um, Numbness, emptiness, fatigue, and digestive issues is number 4. That all goes together. Okay. So the numbness is we're zombies. We're sort of there, but we're not there. We're not fully there. We're kind of checked out. Um, and we're feeling just empty. We are not ourselves that we were before. And it just feels weird. Like we're just going through the motions. Okay. And we're functioning, but it's really just blah, blah. Okay. It's zombies. We feel like zombies. And then number 5 is avoidance of reminders about the loss. Okay. So we don't want to think about it. We kind of put COVID aside. And this is where we're like, I'm done with COVID. Well, no, COVID is still here, but we avoid it. Okay. We avoid talking about it, or we don't want to deal with it because we're tired of it. Okay. Number 6 is keeping the same routines out of fear of forgetting. So this is what talking about losing someone, right? We are afraid of forgetting about those things. But when we're talking about losing, for example, losing connection with our friends, um, we want to maintain that. So even though it's risky, we're still going to go out and we're still going to do these things because I don't want to forget how fun it was, or, how much it means to me. And then a willingness to speak about the loss or acknowledge it. Okay. We don't want to talk about it because it's too painful, right? And again, it makes us mad. So we rather just avoid talking about it and moving on. Um, or it makes us sad, right? So we don't want to think about the past sometimes because it's too painful. Isolation, let's see, and avoiding contact with other people, feeling detached. So again, this we want to be by ourselves, right? And with COVID, we're by ourselves for a long time. That we sort of kind of got used to it, but not really because we still want connection. We're built for connection, but it takes more effort, right? To go and call somebody to get together, or I have to actually wear clothes that are acceptable outside. Um, it Oh, thank you, Nancy, for being my helper. We're talking about the symptoms for sure. So just take a tally. If any of them apply to you, just kind of tally up so that we can see how many apply to people. Um, so, all right. We were talking about unwillingness to speak about it. Let's see, isolation and avoiding contact with other people, feeling detached. We just detach ourselves. It's too much work, right? Like it feels like it's too much work to have to go and gather, or to have to seek that connection. So we keep to ourselves, more than we used to. And that is not helpful. Okay. But it is one of the symptoms that we have, right? When we are grieving, we just want to be left alone and not be bothered. The other one, is phobias and anxiety. So we are fearful. We are fearful of the world. I think with the pandemic, especially, right? Like I said, we're afraid of going outside and getting sick, or that we're going to bring an illness home to our loved ones. And we develop very anxious behaviors. And, if you were at the grocery store, you didn't want anybody near you that, some people got into fights about it because you were too close to me, get away from me. And didn't even go to the store, right? I know I was one of those where it's like, if I don't need to go, I'm not going. um, and try to go at different times to avoid people because it's the anxiety and the fear that we have about it. So if some of us, definitely develop some phobias of being out, and being around other people. Um, Overactivity is the next one. An intense occupation with a hobby or work, or the opposite. Okay, lack of interest in work. So either we threw ourselves into work and we worked, um, until the point that we're now maybe kind of getting burnt out, or for therapists, I know it was back to back sessions, right? We will have back to back, and because there was no boundaries, because we were working from home, we can no longer compartmentalize or take a break to go to lunch, or, ride in the car for a little bit, to go run an errand and then come back. We were like work. So I know some of the therapists, that was one of their losses. They lost the boundaries, okay, that it came from work and home. Okay. Um, so the other side of that one is not the lack of interest. Okay. So checking out from work. It's like you're there doing the minimum, but really it's like, whatever. I'm going to just do my work and whatever I can get away with, and that's it. We sort of checked out from doing our best. We just did whatever we thought was necessary, and that was it, because that's all we could give, maybe. Okay. At the time. Um, Overactivity. Okay, so self-destructive behavior is the next one. So the self-destructive behavior, like drug and alcohol abuse. So like I said, a lot of us drank and the numbers showed it, right? They did studies, and the sales of alcohol totally went through the roof during the pandemic. I mean, we didn't have anything else to do, right? And we were depressed. So like I said, we either were eating or drinking, or those ones that were great, they exercise, right? Um, but those are some of the risky behaviors. Again, if we use it as a coping tool to not feel, right, the pain, but unfortunately, it's not healthy. So the next one is risky or criminal behavior. So and this one is most often in teens. And this is, like I said, what we're seeing in the news, right? All, the robberies, the gun stuff, it's insane. It's pretty intense out there, but again, people are running around with all this unresolved feelings. So guilt, self reproach, self blame, or panic attacks. Okay. So people may feel guilty. This is where I was with my parents, right? And not being, my kids not being able to go to their house, and not being able to come inside my house, and hugging them. That was really hard. There was a lot of guilt, and the parents are great at driving that guilt in. Like, ugh, your brother lets me see them. Like, yep, that's my brother. Um, and then acquisition of physical symptoms representing identification with the disease. So this is more about the deceased person. So it doesn't really apply to us in talking about COVID. Okay, but if you did have losses, this will be like, you get headaches or stomach aches. Like if they had some sort of stomach issue when they died, you may develop some sort of physical symptoms that are similar to what they had. Okay. Depression with tension, intense bitterness, feelings of worthlessness, and self accusation. So there's a lot of depression. We're down. We have reasons to be sad, okay, and reasons to be depressed. The world sucked for a long time, and we were trapped for a long time, and lonely, and not having any physical affection. So there's a lot of reasons for experiencing any of these symptoms, okay? Um, so we are where we should be as humans. Okay. If we didn't feel anything in the past 2 years and we didn't grieve and we didn't have any losses, then I don't know. We haven't been in this world. We all have experienced it collectively, again, as a society, as the world community, have experienced tremendous amount of losses together, and very similar ones, which is, kind of weird because we're even if people are in different countries and another side of the world, they're sort of going through the same situation, of the losses of freedom, right? And the ideal or the idea that we had that we were free of diseases, right? Until this one came around. All right, so let's look at the tally. So, how many do people have? People have one, two, three. Put your number in there. And it's okay. You can be honest. This is what we're here for. This is part of processing, okay? We have to acknowledge where we're at. And if you're shy, that's okay. As long as you keep track of what it is, that's what's important, okay? So let's see. Jorge said 3. 3, 4. Yeah. So as people type in, I'm going to tell you about kiddos, okay? So for our kids, we know that children's symptoms show up in their behavior, right? Because they don't have the words for it. So they are also grieving. Like I said, all of us are. Um, so for the kiddos, it shows up as hostility, irritability, or agitations towards someone connected to the death. So they might be, agitations towards not going to school, right? A lot of them are fearful of going back to school when they went back to school in person. Um, I know my kids are really good with the mask, so they kind of wear it everywhere, and they're afraid, right? This is part of the anxiety that sort of came about. We have, let's see, numbers 4, 3, 3, 9s. Yes, we have a lot of symptoms. Like I said, it's that's where we are. We all are experiencing at least one symptom of those ones, but I think the majority are like in 3 or more. Um, what else with kiddos? So they fight with the siblings, they fight with you, they may become more defiant, they may have trouble falling asleep, they may have nightmares and fear that, you, the parent, is going to die or their caregiver is going to die. They have lack of trust in others, and they also withdraw. They withdraw from families and friends or school. They don't want to talk to anybody, right? So those are some of the symptoms that kids may have and how they may present. The other ones that we had as well. Um, and now that you typed some numbers, what do we do about it? Okay. So let me just check how we're doing on time. Okay, so we're 7:28. Perfect. Whoop, sorry. Um, So what do we do about it? What do we do now that we know, right? Because remember, in order to deal with that and to start coping or cope with it, we have to recognize what the loss is, okay, which we already identify. We have to recognize what the symptoms are that we are experiencing. So that was step number 2. And then we have to recognize, and then we have to work at it. Okay, so now that we remember how I told you to remember what the loss was? Okay, so now that you know what your symptoms are, now we get to move forward and we get to develop a plan. Okay, so what I want you to do is whatever symptoms you had, and everybody's are going to be different. Some are going to be similar, some are going to be different. There are certain coping skills that are helpful. Okay, so one of them is joining a support group. Okay, I don't know of any COVID support groups yet. Maybe there are. I haven't looked. But you can join some sort of group, right? The other one is you add self-care behaviors. And I know that Jorge typed that in the chat earlier on. So self-care, again, we put it aside because we're sort of numb, right? So if you are where most of us are as a society, we're sort of are numb and stuck. We're in the stuck phase of grief and we want to get unstuck. So anything that's going to get us moving and it's going to get us thinking about the future and planning for the future, right? I know Yvette said planning was hard, but we need to plan. We need to plan ahead instead of just being stuck and just going through the motions because then we're not thriving. We have been stuck in survival mode for this past 2 years and we need to move beyond survival because this is long term. right? At this point, it's going to be an ongoing loss. So we have to learn how to live with it, and then how to keep ourselves sane in the process, okay, and healthy and thriving. So self-care behaviors like nutritious eating, so eating well, right? Not drinking as much as we did in 2020. It's a goal. So that's something that we can try, right? Diminish our behaviors and our habits that are not healthy, that are sort of keeping us stuck there. Okay. Movement. So exercise, walking, dancing, any movement, anything that gets your body moving. It increases happy hormones, and it gives us kind of like a natural high. Okay. So if you know, have been pretty sedentary like I have in the past 2 years, it's time for us to get moving. Okay. So join something, right? Go with a friend walking, try and set your goals to get moving and get going, with getting your body out of the stuck mode, right? And then getting enough rest. So sleeping well is important. And we know that when we're stressed out, when we are grieving, sleep is impacted because we're stressed. Okay. We have been under chronic stress this whole 2 years. And unfortunately, sleep gets impacted. So if you're not sleeping well, it is time to work on your sleeping habits, and changing and looking at maybe what are some of the things that you could do to better your sleep. If your sleep is regulated, then the rest sort of falls into place. But if you're not sleeping well, it's definitely going to throw off the rest of your wellness. Okay. Your emotions and your physical wellness is impacted. All right. So a third coping skill is staying connected with family and friends. So we have to push ourselves out of the hole. Okay. So even though we don't want to get dressed up or we don't want to drive anywhere, we are going to have to plan a get together that is safe. Maybe you start just with one person at a time, instead of going to a full on party, but you want to, start connecting with people again, because isolation, remember, is one of them. So we want to do the opposite of that one to push us out of the depression mode and moving us on through the grieving process so that we are not stuck there. Okay. The next one is planning ahead for anniversaries and reminders of the loss. So, are we going to celebrate 2020 anniversary? We're doing it all the time, right? Because it seems like it's going on forever. But you plan ahead, okay? You want to plan ahead for celebrations. You want to plan ahead for trips. You want to plan ahead for yourself. What are your plans for you this year? Okay. I know I did the vision boards, workshops, last month. And with those ones, that is the point. We have to look beyond what's happening right now so that we can be motivated. We have things that motivate us in moving forward. And not, again, getting us away from the numbness, and from the feelings of being stuck. And then getting involved in spiritual activities, whatever that is for you. It doesn't have to be religious, but it is whatever it is for you, whether it's mindfulness, whether it is, going to nature and going on hikes, and just traveling, right? That's another spiritual experience. So it's whatever it is for you. But again, it gets you moving, it gets you out of the stuck mode, and it gets us going. All right. And then the last one is processing the emotional pain. Grief is painful. It is not fun, right? And it's physically painful, it's draining, and it's a gigantic ball of emotions that are sort of like in a big ball of yarn, and that you kind of have to unravel little by little. So, it's not just sadness, it's not just anger, the 5 stages of grief, right? Denial, anger, depression, um, negotiation, and then finally getting to acceptance. It's not all just those five. It's everything all at once. It's frustration. It is disappointment, of not being able to do or be with the people that we want to be. And it's physical pain. That's why it's so draining, because it's in our body. So moving is important. So how do you process that emotional pain? Okay, so that one you can do through therapy. Again, you can do it through a group. You can talk to friends. You can write about it and you can journal. So, you know, those are some coping skills, some things that you can do. So, as you know, I know I'm past the 30 minutes that I said there, but I just saw that we have now 4 hours. Don't worry, I won't keep you 4 hours, but we can go for another 5 minutes or so. Um, but give me a thumbs up if this information is relevant to you, if you found it helpful, because I just kind of want to check in and see where everybody's at. Nope. Are you guys still there? Oop, sorry. Oh, yes. Perfect. Sorry. Thank you. Yes. Wonderful. I'm so glad you guys made it. So, with that, you know, I'm thankful that you came. Okay, the purpose of this is again to bring awareness, to recognize where you're at and just give you space. Okay, give you space so that you have some time to actually reflect and see where you're at and then move forward. Okay. I am doing a group. I'm doing a coaching group, a lifestyle group. So if you're interested or if you have questions, you can reach out and just let me know. Okay. If you are interested in just again working on your own plan to get unstuck. Okay. That is the purpose of the group, is to move us forward and getting us away from the stuck point of being in the stuck point of grief and getting us to getting healthy, right? Working on us again because we're important. As caregivers of our family, as caregivers of others, as being in the service industry, we have to take care of ourselves to be able to give better care to others and not just half-ass it, right? That's one of the symptoms. We're just doing the minimum. If that's where we're at, we need to do better. We need to better for us and for our clients. So thank you so much for joining today. That's all I got for you. Any questions? Oh, some people just joined. Welcome, everybody. Sorry, we're wrapping it up already, but I think this is recorded, so you can go and watch it next time and just follow along and do the activities. Thank you, Rosalva. Thank you, Yvette. Perfect. All right. Any questions? Nobody? No? All right. Well, have a wonderful night, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you made it. Hugs to everybody. Oh, thank you, Eva. She really enjoyed it. Thank you. Bye. Besos. Thank you, sister. All right. That's it. Thank you, everyone. See you at the next one.